August 24, 1857, New York City. A bank announces it cannot pay its depositors. Within hours the news travels 500 miles, not by horse, not by ship, but through copper wire at the speed of lightning. By sunset, every major city in America knows, banks are collapsing, people are panicking. The contagion spreads faster than any disease. Then it jumps the Atlantic Ocean. Within weeks banks fail in London, Glasgow, Liverpool, then Hamburg, then Paris, then as far as South America and the Far East. The entire world economy implodes in a matter of months. But here is what makes this different. This is the first time in human history that a financial crisis spreads globally in real time. The first time technology connects markets so tightly that a bank failure in Ohio destroys livelihoods in Scotland. The first time the world discovers it has become one fragile, interconnected system. How did this happen? And why are we living through the exact same pattern right now, just faster? This is the story of the Panic of 1857. By the end, you will understand the 7-step pattern that creates every global financial crisis. See how technology accelerates economic contagion, and recognize the warning signs hiding in plain sight today. This is not just history. This is a blueprint for what comes next. It is spring, 1856. New York City. The smell of coal smoke hangs over Manhattan. Steamships crowd the harbor. The clatter of horses and carriages fills Broadway. In the marble halls of Wall Street, men in top hats trade paper that represents fortunes being built in the wilderness 1,000 miles west. The city pulses with a new kind of energy, the energy of a nation that has discovered it can grow faster than anyone thought possible. America has just won a war with Mexico. The country now stretches from Atlantic to Pacific, and beneath the California hills, they found something that changed everything: gold, mountains of it. From 1848 to the mid-1850s, California pours gold into the American economy like water from a fire hose. The money supply explodes. Credit becomes cheap. Everyone wants to invest. Everyone wants to grow. Everyone believes this time is different. The engine driving all of this is the railroad. Over 20,000 miles of new track laid in the 1850s alone. These iron roads connect the wilderness to the cities. They turn empty prairie into farmland worth money. They make land speculators rich overnight. British investors pour millions into American railroad bonds. They cannot get enough. The returns look incredible on paper. A railroad company can buy land for nothing, lay track through it, and suddenly that land is worth 10 times what they paid. The math seems to work. The future seems limitless. But beneath this gleaming surface, something else is happening. Something nobody wants to see. The railroads are not making money from moving freight. They are making money from selling bonds. They are not building sustainable businesses. They are building debt machines. And the whole system depends on one thing: continuous growth, continuous expansion, continuous new investment. The moment the music stops, the entire structure collapses. Meet James Buchanan. He is about to become president in March 1857. He looks at the booming economy and sees prosperity. He believes in limited government intervention. To him, the markets are working perfectly. The invisible hand is doing its job. But there is a lawyer in New York named George Templeton Strong. He keeps a detailed diary, and in early 1857, he is writing about something that troubles him. He sees wild speculation everywhere. He sees people mortgaging their homes to buy railroad stock. He sees bankers making loans they know cannot be repaid. He notices that everyone assumes the boom will last forever. Nobody is preparing for winter. And then there is a banker named August Belmont. He represents the Rothschild banking family in New York. He understands something the optimists do not. He sees the numbers behind the railroad companies. He knows most of them are insolvent. He knows the only thing keeping them alive is new investors buying their bonds. He quietly starts pulling money out of the market. He says nothing publicly. Why would he? What none of them know yet is that 200 miles off the coast of South Carolina, a hurricane is forming that will trigger the first domino. But before we get to the collapse, we need to understand the innovation that makes this crisis different from every crisis that came before. August 1858, just 1 year earlier. After years of failed attempts, engineers successfully lay a telegraph cable across the Atlantic Ocean. For the first time in human history, messages can travel between America and Europe in minutes instead of weeks. Queen Victoria sends a message to President Buchanan. It takes 16 hours to transmit because the technology is so new, but it works. The world just became smaller. Financial markets just became connected in a way they have never been before, and nobody understands what this means. Here is why the telegraph matters. Before 1857, financial crises spread slowly. A bank fails in New York, and London might not know for 2 weeks. By then, the crisis could be contained. Information traveled at the speed of ships, but now, information travels at the speed of light. A bank run in New York becomes news in London the same day. Fear spreads instantly, and fear is contagious. The telegraph does not just speed up communication, it creates a synchronized global financial system. When one part fails, the whole system can feel it immediately. This is new, this is dangerous, and in 1857, the world is about to learn this lesson the hard way. The railroads are where the real money is being made. Or at least, where everyone thinks it is being made. Take the Ohio Life Insurance and Trust Company. On paper, it is a conservative institution. Insurance and trust. Sounds safe. Sounds boring, but behind the scenes, its New York office is doing something very different. It is heavily invested in railroad securities and land speculation. The company is lending money to railroad companies at a furious pace. These railroads use the money to buy land and lay track. Then they issue more bonds based on the value of that land. Then they use those bonds as collateral for more loans. It is a perfect circle. As long as land prices keep rising and new investors keep buying bonds, everyone makes money. The Ohio Life office manager in New York is making a fortune in fees and commissions. He personally vouches for these railroad investments. He tells depositors their money is safe. He believes it himself. Then you have farmers and small businessmen across the Midwest. They see the railroad coming to their town and their land value triples. They borrow against that land to buy more land. They borrow to start businesses. They borrow to speculate. A farmer who used to make $500 a year suddenly has $5,000 in debt and owns 10 times the land he owned before. On paper, he is rich. In reality, he is leveraged to the hilt. But that is fine because land values only go up. The railroad guarantees it. Except the railroad itself is also built on debt. Debt backed by land values that are inflated by speculation. It is a house of cards where every card is holding up 10 other cards. By early 1857, the mania is in full swing. Railroad stock prices have no relationship to the actual business fundamentals. The Michigan Southern Railroad pays a dividend of 10%. That is incredible. Investors pile in, but if you look at the books, the company is barely profitable. It is paying dividends with borrowed money. It is paying dividends to attract more investors to buy more bonds. The stock price keeps rising because the dividend is high. The dividend stays high because new investors keep coming in. This works until it does not. Eastern newspapers run advertisements for Western land every day. By now, prices will never be this low again. The future is being built. Get in or get left behind. A plot of land in Kansas that was worthless 5 years ago now sells for $1,000. Not because you can farm it profitably, but because someone else will pay $1,200 next month. Speculation has replaced investment. Hope has replaced analysis. And anyone who questions it is called a pessimist who does not understand the new economy. Respected economists write articles explaining why the old rules do not apply anymore. America has infinite land. The railroad makes that land valuable. Immigration brings workers. Gold from California provides capital. This expansion can continue for decades, maybe forever. Critics are dismissed as old-fashioned. They do not understand modern finance. They do not understand technology. They do not see the big picture. By summer of 1857, even conservative bankers are swept up in it. You cannot sit on the sidelines when your competitors are making 20% returns. Your depositors will leave. Your investors will leave. You have to participate. So they do. They lend more. They invest more. They leverage more. And then comes the peak. August 1857, the SS Central America sails from Panama toward New York. In its hold, it carries 15 tons of California gold. That is worth $1.5 million. An enormous sum. This gold is meant for New York banks. They need it. The Eastern financial system is running low on actual specie. All the credit expansion has drained the vaults. The gold is desperately needed to back up all the paper circulating through the economy. The ship is also carrying 600 passengers. Many are miners returning from California with their fortunes. This is a routine trip. The Central America has made it many times before. But on September 9, 1857, 200 miles off the Carolina coast, the ship sails into a Category 2 hurricane. For 2 days, the crew fights the storm. Water pours into the hold. The engines fail. They try to bail. They try to patch the hole, but the sea is too strong. On September 12, the ship begins to sink. A passing brig manages to rescue 153 people, but 425 souls go down with the ship, along with 15 tons of gold. The news reaches New York on September 13th. Wall Street reacts immediately, not to the human tragedy, to the financial implications. That gold was supposed to shore up bank reserves. Now it is at the bottom of the ocean. The banks were counting on it. They made loans assuming it would arrive. Now there is a hole in their balance sheets, a hole filled with seawater. At first, people think the market can absorb this. It is just one shipment. More gold will come, but the loss of the Central America exposes something. It reveals how thin the margins actually are, how dependent the whole system is on continuous inflows. If losing one gold shipment causes stress, what does that say about the system? Investors start asking questions. They start looking at balance sheets. They start doing the math they should have done months ago. And when they do the math, they realize the terrifying truth. The banks do not have enough reserves. The railroads do not make enough profit. The land is not worth what people paid for it. The whole thing is built on confidence, and confidence just took a hit. August 24, 1857, the Ohio Life Insurance and Trust Company makes an announcement. The New York office has suspended payments. It cannot meet its obligations. Depositors cannot withdraw their funds. The company is insolvent. This is not some small regional bank. This is a major financial institution with branches across the country and connections to dozens of other banks. The news spreads through the telegraph network like electricity. Within hours, every bank in America knows. Panic begins at the edges. Small depositors rush to withdraw their savings. They have heard the stories from previous panics. They know how this works. The first ones out are fine. The last ones out lose everything. So they run. And when they run, they create the very crisis they fear. The run spreads from bank to bank like a disease. A bank in Philadelphia suspends payments. Then one in Boston, then Baltimore. The problem is simple. Banks do not keep all their deposits in the vault. They lend most of it out. That is how banking works. Under normal conditions, only a small percentage of depositors want their money on any given day. But when everyone wants their money at once, the math breaks down. The bank can call in some loans. But loans to railroads that have no revenue. Loans backed by land nobody wants to buy right now. Loans that cannot be repaid. So the bank fails. And when it fails, it cannot pay other banks what it owes them. So those banks come under pressure. And so on, and so on. By October, the crisis is in full freefall. Railroad stocks collapse. The Michigan Southern Railroad that was paying 10% dividends suspends all payments. Its stock loses 60% of its value in 3 weeks. Land prices crater. That plot in Kansas that sold for $1,000 cannot find a buyer at $300. The farmer who mortgaged everything to buy 10 parcels of land is ruined. He cannot sell, he cannot pay, he defaults. The bank that lent him the money takes a loss. That loss weakens the bank, which causes more depositors to panic, which creates more bank runs. The spiral accelerates. By mid-October, over 1,400 state banks have suspended specie payments. They will not give you gold or silver for your paper money. Your account balance is just a number on a ledger. You cannot access it. Over 5,000 businesses fail in the United States in the last 3 months of 1857. Unemployment surges. Construction stops. Railroads go bankrupt. The boom turns to bust in a matter of weeks. But here is where it gets truly unprecedented. The crisis does not stay in America. Remember the telegraph. Remember the connected markets. British banks have loaned millions to American railroads. When those railroads default, British banks take losses, big losses. On October 27th, the Borough Bank of Liverpool fails. It was heavily exposed to American securities. Then the Western Bank of Scotland collapses. It had made huge loans to American trading companies. The Bank of England sees gold flowing out as investors panic. It raises interest rates to stop the outflow. But higher interest rates make credit tighter, which hurts businesses, which causes more failures. The crisis jumps from America to Britain in a matter of days, not weeks like in previous panics. Days from Britain, it spreads to continental Europe. German banks fail. French banks come under pressure. The panic reaches South America, where economies depend on exporting to Europe and America. When European and American demand collapses, South American exports collapse. When exports collapse, their economies collapse. By November, the crisis has touched every continent where international trade exists. This is the first truly global financial crisis, and it happened in less than 3 months from the first bank failure. The speed is what makes it different. The telegraph made the world small, and when the world is small, disaster can spread everywhere at once. Let me tell you 3 human stories from this collapse. First, there is a merchant named Thomas Wilson in New York. He runs a successful import business. He has been in business for 30 years. built it from nothing. He is conservative with his finances, or so he thinks, but he has made one mistake. He keeps his money in the Ohio Life Insurance and Trust Company. It seems safe. Insurance and trust. What could go wrong? When the bank suspends payments on August 24th, his entire working capital is frozen. He cannot pay his suppliers in England. He cannot pay his workers. His reputation is ruined overnight. Not because he did anything wrong, but because his bank failed. Within 2 months, his business is bankrupt. 30 years of work gone. He is 55 years old. He has to start over. Then there is a young couple in Ohio, John and Sarah Mitchell. They saved 4 years to buy a small farm. They borrowed a bit extra to expand. The bank was eager to lend. The land value was rising. It seemed smart. When the panic hits, the value of their land drops by half. They owe more than the farm is worth. They try to keep up with payments, but crop prices have collapsed. Nobody has money to buy anything. They default. The bank forecloses. They lose everything. The farm, their home, their savings. They end up working as laborers on someone else's land. The dream destroyed. But then there is a banker in New York named Moses Taylor. He runs Citibank. In early 1857, he does something unusual. He starts building up his cash reserves. He turns down profitable loans. His colleagues think he is being overly cautious. He is leaving money on the table, but Taylor sees the speculation. He sees the leverage. He sees the risk. He does not know when it will break, but he knows it will break, so he prepares. When the panic comes, Citibank has enough reserves to weather the storm. Taylor actually uses the crisis to buy assets at fire sale prices. He emerges from 1857 far richer than he entered it. Same crisis, 3 very different outcomes. In the aftermath, the financial system is in chaos. Courts are flooded with bankruptcy cases. Over 4,900 commercial failures in the United States in 1857 and 1858 combined. The government tries to help. President Buchanan does almost nothing. He believes the market will correct itself. State governments suspend banking regulations to prevent more failures. It does not help much. The damage is done. Congress debates new banking laws. They argue about whether the national government should create a more uniform banking system. The debate goes nowhere. Nothing substantial changes. Recovery is slow. It takes until 1859 for the economy to stabilize. Some regions do not fully recover until the Civil War creates new demand. The human cost is staggering. Families ruined, businesses destroyed, trust shattered, and the whole thing happened faster than any crisis before it because of a copper wire carrying electric signals. So what really happened? History books say the panic of 1857 was caused by overspeculation in railroads and the loss of the SS Central America. But that is not just wrong, it is dangerously incomplete. Here is what actually happened. The panic was not caused by speculation. Speculation was a symptom. The real cause was structural. The American economy in the 1850s had no central bank. Every state chartered its own banks. There was no coordination, no lender of last resort. When crisis hit, there was nobody to stabilize the system. Banks issued their own currency, literally their own paper money. The value of that money depended on trust in that specific bank. When trust evaporated, so did the value of the money. This created a fundamentally unstable system. Let me break this down. Step 1 was easy credit from gold inflows. California gold floods the money supply. Interest rates drop. Borrowing becomes cheap. Step 2 was railroad expansion funded by debt. Railroads borrow to build. They use future revenue as collateral, but the future revenue is speculative. Step 3 was land speculation driven by railroad access. Land near railroads becomes valuable. People buy it not to use, but to sell. Prices disconnect from fundamental value. Step 4 was banks lending against inflated collateral. Banks accept land as collateral at inflated prices. This creates more credit, which inflates prices more. Step 5 was international capital flows, amplifying everything. British investors pour money into American securities. This provides even more fuel for speculation. Step 6 was the telegraph connecting everything. When crisis starts, it spreads instantly. No time for adjustment. No time for intervention. Step 7 was structural fragmentation preventing response. No central authority can step in. Every bank fights alone. Most fail. Think of it like this. Imagine a chain where every link is made of a different material. Wood, iron, rope, glass. Under normal stress, it holds together. But when you pull hard, it breaks at the weakest point. And because the links are different materials, when one breaks, the stress concentrates on the next weak point. Then that breaks. Then the next. the chain disintegrates. That was the American banking system in 1857. Fragmented, with no strong central link to absorb the shock. When the Ohio Life Insurance and Trust Company failed, the shock rippled through every connection and there was no mechanism to stop it. But here is what nobody talks about. The people who made real money in 1857 were not the ones buying railroad stock or land. They were the ones issuing the bonds and taking the fees. Investment bankers made fortunes selling railroad bonds to British investors. They got paid whether the railroad succeeded or failed. Land speculators who got in early and got out before the peak made money. Railroad executives who issued stock, paid themselves salaries and bonuses, and left before the collapse made money. The system was designed to reward short-term extraction over long-term value creation. The more bonds issued, the more fees for the bankers. The more stock sold, the more compensation for the executives. The more loans made, the more profit for the bank managers, until it all collapsed. And when it collapsed, the people who extracted value were fine. They had already taken their money. The people who lost were the ones holding the bag at the end. The depositors, the late investors, the work investors, the workers who lost their jobs when businesses failed. This was not an accident. This was not just stupidity or irrational exuberance. This was a system with incentives that rewarded reckless behavior. And when everyone is rewarded for recklessness, you get reckless outcomes. Now let me show you the pattern. This is the global crisis formula. It happens every time markets become interconnected without proper coordination. First, the new paradigm. Everyone says this time is different because of new technology or new markets. In 1857, it was the railroad and the telegraph. Second, easy money. Credit expands faster than the real economy. Lending standards drop. Leverage increases. Third, social proof. Everyone is doing it. Institutions join in. Critics are dismissed. Fourth, international contagion. Capital flows across borders. Foreign investors pour in. This amplifies the boom. Fifth, complexity and fragmentation. The system is hard to understand. Lots of independent actors, no central coordination. Sixth, the trigger. Something breaks the confidence. Not always a big event, just enough to start questions. Seventh, cascade failure. When one piece fails, it pulls down everything connected to it. And in a connected world, that is everything. This pattern has repeated in every global financial crisis since 1857. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The crisis of 1873, same pattern. The crisis of 1907, same pattern. The Great Depression, same pattern. The 2008 financial crisis, same pattern. The specifics change, the technology changes, but the pattern remains constant. Now let us talk about 2026. Right now we live in the most interconnected global economy in history. Money moves around the world in microseconds. A stock market crash in Tokyo can trigger selling in New York before the sun rises. Algorithms execute trades faster than humans can think. Derivatives link every market to every other market. The global financial system is orders of magnitude more complex than 1857. And here is the interesting part. We have some of the same vulnerabilities. Let us run through the checklist. New paradigm, check. Everyone says this time is different because of artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, and modern monetary policy. We have tools previous generations did not have. We can manage risk better. We can print money to prevent crises. We have learned from the past. Easy money, check. Interest rates were near zero for over a decade after 2008. They went back down during COVID. Massive amounts of debt accumulated. Corporate debt, government debt, personal debt. Debt as a percentage of GDP is higher than almost any point in history. Social proof, check. Institutional investors, pension funds, and sovereign wealth funds are all chasing returns in increasingly complex assets. Your grandmother is asking about cryptocurrency. College students are trading options. Everyone is in the market somehow. International contagion, check. Global capital flows are enormous. Emerging markets depend on foreign investment. Developed markets own each other's debt. The entire global economy is stitched together with financial obligations and derivative contracts. A default in one country can cascade worldwide. Complexity and fragmentation, check. Can you explain how the repo market works? Can you describe what a synthetic CDO is? Can you tell me who actually owns the mortgage on your house after it has been securitized and sold? Most financial professionals cannot fully explain the system, and there is still fragmentation. National regulators for global markets. Different rules in different jurisdictions. No true global coordination. The trigger, we cannot predict this. But watch for sudden liquidity crunches. Watch for unexpected defaults. Watch for geopolitical events that disrupt supply chains or payment systems. The blame game, we will see if this happens. But history suggests nobody accepts responsibility when it does. Now, is this exactly like 1857? No, we have learned some lessons. We have central banks now. The Federal Reserve exists. The European Central Bank exists. They can inject liquidity in a crisis. We have deposit insurance. Your bank account is insured up to certain limits. You will not lose everything like people did in 1857. We have better communication and coordination. Central banks talk to each other. Regulators share information. We have international institutions like the IMF that can help stabilize crises. These are real improvements. These could change the outcome. But here is what history teaches. The pattern does not need to be identical to be dangerous. The core dynamics remain the same. When you have easy credit, complex systems, international interconnection, and fragmented authority, you create conditions for cascade failure. The 2008 financial crisis proved we are not immune. It proved that modern tools can slow a crisis but not prevent it. It proved that when the system is interconnected, failure spreads fast. We are more connected now than in 2008. We have more debt now than in 2008. We have more complexity now than in 2008. The tools to manage crisis have improved. But so has the potential scale of crisis. What should you watch for? First, watch for sudden spikes in volatility. When markets that are usually calm suddenly swing wildly, that shows stress in the system. Second, watch for liquidity problems. When institutions have trouble selling assets or borrowing money, that is a warning sign. This is how previous crises started to manifest. Third, watch for contagion between seemingly unrelated markets. When a problem in one small market spreads to larger markets, that shows the connections are tight. That shows cascade risk. Fourth, watch for central banks acting urgently. If multiple central banks coordinate emergency actions, they see something scary. Fifth, watch for credit spreads widening. When the gap between safe bonds and risky bonds increases sharply, that means fear is rising. I am not predicting a crash. I am showing you the pattern. What you do with that information is up to you, but understand this. The lesson from 1857 is not that crises are inevitable. The lesson is that interconnection without coordination creates fragility. When you link everything together and make it move fast, you amplify both booms and busts. The telegraph made 1857 worse than previous panics because it spread fear at the speed of light. The internet and modern finance make potential crises today even faster. We have gained enormous benefits from global interconnection, efficiency, growth, wealth creation, but we have also created systemic risk that previous generations never faced. Understanding that trade-off is essential. So why do we keep falling for this? Because the crisis is not a market failure. It is a feature of human psychology and system design. We are wired to trust recent experience over historical patterns. The 1850s boom lasted for years. By 1857, an entire generation of bankers had only known good times. They thought they were smarter than their predecessors. They thought their technology made old rules obsolete. They were wrong. We do the same thing. The last 40 years have been mostly prosperous in developed economies. We have experienced volatility. We have had recessions, but we have avoided Great Depression-level catastrophes. This creates confidence. Confidence creates complacency. Complacency creates vulnerability. We also have short institutional memory. The people running major banks today were not running banks in 2008. Most of them were junior employees or not in finance at all. The people making policy today did not live through 1857 or 1929. They studied them in books. But studying something is different from experiencing it. When you experience a crisis, you feel the fear. You remember the panic. You internalize the lesson. When you study it, you understand it intellectually but not emotionally. So each generation has to relearn the lesson, often the hard way. And here is the deeper truth. The crash is not the real disaster. The crash is the correction. The disaster is the build-up. The disaster is creating a system so fragile that one failure can topple everything. The disaster is believing you are immune to the pattern. The disaster is thinking technology or sophistication or intelligence makes you different from everyone who came before. It does not. The tools change. The speed changes. But human nature remains constant. We chase returns. We follow crowds. We believe in magic when we want something badly enough. We convince ourselves that risk has been eliminated when it has only been hidden. The market does not need to trick you. You trick yourself. But here is what the story of 1857 really teaches us. Interconnection is a double-edged sword. When times are good, connected markets spread prosperity. Capital flows to productive uses, efficiencies multiply, everyone benefits. But when times are bad, connected markets spread contagion. Fear flows as fast as capital. One failure pulls down 100 others, and the same channels that created wealth destroy it. You cannot have one without the other. You cannot have the benefits of global markets without the risks of global markets. The question is not whether we should disconnect. That is impossible and undesirable. The question is whether we build systems robust enough to handle the stress. The builders of the telegraph in 1857 thought they were creating a tool for communication. They did not realize they were creating a transmission mechanism for financial panic. The builders of modern financial technology think they are creating efficiency and transparency. They may also be creating transmission mechanisms for crisis we cannot yet imagine. That does not mean we should stop innovating. It means we should innovate with humility, with awareness of unintended consequences, with systems designed for failure, not just for success. Every generation thinks they have evolved past the mistakes of their grandparents. Every generation learns the same lesson the hard way. The question is not whether crises will happen again. They will. The question is whether you will recognize the pattern before it completes. Understanding this does not give you a crystal ball. Markets are too complex, the triggers are too unpredictable, the timing is impossible to know. But understanding gives you something better than a crystal ball. It gives you pattern recognition. It gives you a framework for thinking about risk. It gives you the ability to ask the right questions when everyone else is celebrating. When everyone around you is getting rich on something they do not fully understand, you will feel the pull. When experts assure you that old rules do not apply anymore, you will want to believe them. When people call you paranoid for being cautious, you will doubt yourself. You are human. This is normal. But you will also hear a voice in the back of your mind saying, I have seen this pattern before. That voice is history speaking. Listen to it. You cannot control markets. You cannot control policy. You cannot control what central banks do or what other investors do with their money. But you can control your own decisions. You can control your assumptions. You can control how much risk you take. You can control whether you prepare for the possibility that things go wrong. That is the real lesson here. The people who survived 1857 financially were not the ones who predicted the exact trigger. They were the ones who understood the structure was fragile and acted accordingly. They kept reserves. They avoided excessive leverage. They did not bet everything on the boom continuing forever. They did not need to know when it would end. They just needed to know it would end eventually. And that was enough. Now I want to hear from you. What current market or system do you think fits this pattern of interconnected fragility? Are we more vulnerable now than in 1857 or less? What am I missing in this analysis? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The best insights often come from you, not me. If this changed how you see the global financial system, hit that like button. Subscribe if you want more stories that connect the past to the present and reveal the patterns hiding in plain sight. Next time, we are diving into the panic of 1907, the crisis that was so bad it finally convinced America to create the Federal Reserve. Another pattern, another lesson, another warning we might be ignoring. Remember, history does not repeat, but it rhymes. And right now, the rhyme scheme is getting very familiar. See you in the next one.